Hello and welcome back for the last in series 1, the 10th video, and I don't know if there's as much meat in this as perhaps some of the other ones, but there are some essentials which may or may not have been focused on, and they're going to include the need for practice, which we've sort of talked about a bit. I want to go back a little bit and talk about psychological projection in that term and what that is and what we can do about it, and also to think about some of the things we ought to be doing as we're progressing with our coaching, particularly if we want to work in organisations, and particularly if we want to work for qualifications now or later, or certifications now or later. What are those? What are some of those things that we might be doing? Some of that, of course, is training. We train coaches in my organisation in at least 3 different levels. So we've got ILM 3, we've got an ILM certificated, nationally certificated program, and of course we've got a CMI level 5 program as well. And there are other people who do training around coaching. We also train managers to use coaching in their work, and of course you can get some training and enhance what you know and have experience in a safe setting. So that safe setting, that practice, whether you're paying for it or whether it's done free in an organisation, you know, like the ICF or our coaching foundation or AOC or whatever, that practice is useful. It's very, very, very useful to have, as I've said before, that coachee experience of being coached by others and learning from others. And we can add to that by maybe doing recordings, maybe taking video and analysing that, or having others assist us in that. Co-coaching, of course, very, very useful. That's which you can organise through some of the organisations, including our own. We sort of touched on psychological projection without using that phrase, and all it really means is when we have, if you like, a relationship or expectations that aren't actually true. So an example of that might be the coachee beginning to want to please the coach, or them feeling that it's a very special relationship because the coach is beginning to provide stuff in between the sessions or offering free telephone sessions. If none of that was in the boundary setting, in the scene setting, right at the beginning before the coachings started, then that can look quite special. There's another issue here very much related to this, and this is very often, I and my colleagues often find this, very often that the coaching relationship is the most intimate relationship that a coachee has ever had in their lives. And I don't mean physically intimate, I mean psychologically and emotionally intimate. More intimate than any conversation that they've had with their husband, their wife, their partner, their friends. And that does happen quite a bit. I've often had conversations with people who have said, I've never told anybody this, my wife doesn't know that I'm, you know, acting like a baby at work, and I'm throwing the toys out of the pram, and I shouldn't be doing that, and I just realise it's just not productive, and it's against my desires and beliefs. And those are almost word for word expressions which come into my mind from real life experiences with some pretty senior people. So that is out there. Now that safe space, of course, can, in certain circumstances, that lead to a projection, an expectation on behalf of that individual which isn't constructive in the coaching. And the worst, perhaps one of the worst examples of that, is where the coachee actually falls in love. There's what we call cathectation. There's this sense of a love that isn't actually there, because what you're providing is attention, you're providing support, you're facilitating their process, but you're definitely not having a relationship with them, and neither are you necessarily sharing very much of your process with them. You might be giving them some examples, but you're certainly not sharing at the level that they are sharing, as one would do if one was beginning to form a proper relationship with an equal level of sharing in various contexts. That doesn't exist. So projection can be a real issue, and it's one that's quite difficult to be aware of as a coach, and that's one of the reasons why most people now recommend that we have a supervisor. Now, by supervisor I don't mean it's like a guru coach or brilliant coach. They need to be someone who understands about psychology, who understands, maybe has got some counselling training or psychotherapy training in particular, would understand about projection, would understand what the questions are to ask you about these things, and particularly to look at the emotive elements of your experiencing during coaching, because it'll be your emotional responses which will signal and be particularly useful in working out whether you have, as a coach, have been pulled into projection. And they'll also ask questions about the other individual, the people you're coaching, how they are, what your perceptions are about them, and then they will be probing those perceptions and those emotional senses that you have about your coachees to see whether or not there may be some issues there, and then that can lead to a conversation about how in the next session you can deal with those face to face with that individual in a direct and overt in an overt way. Lastly, I'd like to talk about record keeping a bit. I'd like to say it's important to keep notes and records. We keep ours for about 3-4 years on average, some a bit longer, particularly if there have been more than one set of sessions in coaching. So we keep records for about that length of time, and then they're cross-shredded, and the shreddings are recycled. It's valuable to be doing that, and to have those records. Obviously it's valuable to be looking at notes and before we coach, and setting our mindsets before we coach with individuals we've seen before. And the other thing I think at this stage useful, if you haven't been doing it, is to think about continuous professional development and record keeping in that respect. So who are you coaching? Who have you been coached by and when? For what periods? And to keep a record of all that. Critical if you want to work for an organisation like my organisation, Angus McLeod Associates, because we will expect that, we will want that, and we certainly won't be giving you work unless you do have those records, and you do have some training, you do have some experience. We wouldn't be using you. So at an early stage it's useful to be thinking about keeping those records, getting access to courses and certificated courses, etc., and keeping a record of all that as well. A bit duller than some of the stuff that we've been talking about in the earlier videos, but essential to be thinking about if you haven't done already. I'd like to say thank you for listening. If you've got to video 10, well done, and I hope to see you, well, you see me anyway. I hope you'll join me for the second series of Tips for Coaches, Series 2, and I hope you'll get something from that too. Thank you very much for being with me.